Hey guys, so tactical isn't like sport and performance. We're not lined up in perfect positions all the time. That's where it's really important to train unilaterally, i.e. one side. Come and check out how we do it.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about unilateral movement, and what that is simplistically is single arm, single leg type movements, why that translates into functional stability, and why that will help make your career last longer. So from a fire side, there's a lot of situations where we have to reach into a bad position to grab a patient. You have to turn, pull a hose around a corner, picking up extrication tools, putting them in strange positions. So you want to be strong kind of all through your body. Not everything's going to be perfect where you're on 2 feet or you're on 2 hands. Sometimes you have to do things on one side has to move differently than the other. So being strong independently is a really important part of our job. Danny can hit a little bit from the tactical side and why it's important.
Well, it's a lot of the same crossover, really. I mean, overall, doing unilateral movements builds to your overall athleticism, and anything you can do with one leg, you can do better with 2 legs. Anything you can do with 1 hand, you can do better with 2 hands. So really, it's just the overall creating the tactical athlete, if you will.
And we know from kind of the research and particularly the clinical side of things, that all humans are slightly imbalanced. Like everyone naturally is going to have one side that's slightly stronger than the other. And we see that massively exaggerated in many sports athletes. So like racket sports particularly, they'll have one side that's much stronger than the other. And the same is true for tactical. We know that when you're on duty, the job has to get done. There's no kind of like, well, that's not completely balanced. The job has to get done. And if that's single-sided, that's single-sided. So the gym is our opportunity to try and like shore that person up, because we know longevity is the king really for this. So what we want to try and do is just close those gaps of imbalances between left and right. And in terms of the best way of doing that, historically, we used to borrow a lot again from the clinical world, looking at isolated muscle tests or joint range of motion tests, things like that. But what we found is that that's kind of lacking a lot of the carryover to real world activities. You can see something on the plinth or on the table, but it maybe doesn't translate back to more organic things like running or rucking or even lifting. So what we've kind of moved more towards, and this is softly as well, is analyzing movement, more functional movements, if you like. So looking at things like your running gait, even your walking gait, or your ability to lift and ruck. And then from that, we can kind of peel back and try and deduce what's going on in terms of movement imbalances, in terms of neurodysfunction, and then apply corrective measures to those global movements. So we're directly improving those rather than trying to kind of guess at correlates.
Yeah, what Coach said.
All right, so as a fireman, a lot of times we get put in really weird positions. So a lot of times, if you have to reach down and get a patient that's stuck between the tub and the toilet, you're not going to be able to get in a good position with both your feet, use both your arms. There's several other examples of that where you have to carry a litter up a hill to where you're bringing somebody up from an extrication. You have to reach up, grab something off the ceiling, or you're pulling ceiling with just a single arm kind of turned to one side. That's several different examples of why unilateral movement's important. So we're going to cover that today, talking about why it's important for function and why it's important for longevity. So Danny, as far as a tactical professional, like what are some instances where you'd have to use that?
Really the same thing. It's all same. That transferability is tactical. It's operational in nature. I'm just spouting random shit right now. I should stop fucking talking. So really what we're doing is it's the same type of situation. You're trying to build overall athleticism, and anything you can do on a single side, you can do better with both sides. But the same examples, carrying people for long distances, you don't always get a chance to say, hey, I'm gonna switch out, right? The situation will dictate those things. So if you can't switch out and you're stuck on one side, it's nice to add unilateral training into your everyday workouts, or as often as possible. Nobody wants to become Hellboy or Finding Nemo.
I think that's a great point. So in tactical, often it's kind of the environment or the scene that dictates how you set up rather than your choice. So when we're in the gym, like we were talking about before, if you want to work both arms, then you can. If you want to just do a single arm, then you can, and you can play to your strengths. But in tactical, you might have an object in the way, or a patient situated in a certain position where you're forced to get into that position. And basically what this kind of stuff's about is longevity. We want to be able to keep these guys doing this stuff for as long as possible. And we know that from looking in kind of the clinical stuff or in sports science research, we know that most humans are slightly asymmetrical. So there's going to be one side that's slightly stronger than the other, has slightly more range of motion than the other. And that's kind of okay. We see it in sport, like racket sports, for instance, one side is going to be stronger. And that's generally okay. Where that can start to become a little bit of a problem, though, is when those boundaries start to exceed. So kind of 20, 30%, if you start to see discrepancies of that kind of nature, then we know that potentially injury risk and longevity is going to be at fault. And that's where unilateral work is incredible for helping to kind of shore up those things. Now, in terms of assessing it, in terms of figuring out whether you've got imbalances, historically, we borrowed from the clinical world, from physiotherapy, physical therapy, and we'd look at individual joint range of motion or strength. But we kind of find that that's lacking transfer to the real world. So what you see on a clinical table or a plinth might not be relevant when it comes to actually running or moving with gear. What we started to move towards with Softly is looking at functional or more organic movement patterns, like looking at your running, looking at your lifting, your rocking, your swimming, and seeing if we can identify those imbalances either from watching the kinematics, so watching the movement patterns, or looking at force data. And that helps us kind of unpick what's going on. So what we can then do is we can provide prescriptive programs to correct those functional movements rather than kind of guessing at correlates. And that's something that we offer, actually. If you're part of the Softly family and you have access to our Facebook team room, if you've got any movement footage of you running, you rocking, swimming, lifting, please feel free to send it over to us. And as part of what we offer within your monthly subscription is full access to us coaches. We're more than happy to sit down with you, break down your footage, see what's going on, and offer you pointers so we can get you moving in the right direction. Yeah. Again, increase performance, increase longevity.
Right. And it's a game changer to be able to have access to a coach. A lot of people don't have that. So here you have that opportunity. So it's definitely something to take advantage of.
So we're going to cover a couple of unilateral movements just as examples and why it's important for core stabilization. So Matt right here, as he sets up, he's kind of stacked up over his hips. He's got his front leg at a 90-degree angle, and whenever he presses, he's going to press it straight up. Now, as far as core stabilization goes, he's going to bring that belly button in towards his spine. He's going to stay stacked up over his hips, and you're getting kind of a 2-for-1 on this movement because not only are you getting work on this single side, you're also getting some core stabilization work as well. So if Matt wants to switch legs and put it on the same side, this is going to be slightly easier because he's got a little bit more stabilization under the side that he's going to press. So go ahead and press up. So if you need to start somewhere, you can start on this side where you're same side with your leg as you are in your press, because it's going to be slightly easier. And as you progress, you can switch to the other side, make it a little bit more difficult, and then you're going to pull that trunk in and you're going to get that work out of this same single-sided press. All right, so a lower body example of a unilateral movement is going to be this single-sided RDL. So when Matt goes down, he's going to try to keep that back flat. He's going to control his motion down, trying to keep that knee tracking. And as he comes back up, he's going to keep that core as tight as he can. He's going to get as much work out of that single leg as well. As we talked about earlier, it's a bilateral movement, so you can see how much stability he has to produce to keep himself from falling over. So that's really the big benefit of doing these type of movements. If he changes it up a little bit, if you want to add some difficulty, he can go to the opposite side. Bring it down. It's going to be slightly more difficult because his body's going to want to rotate this way. So he has to stabilize that hip and do that way to keep himself from falling over. And as Matt's showing you, that's the benefit you're getting from these movements. You really have to keep yourself tight, and that's going to transfer over into either your sport, your normal daily life, or your tactical type job. So another thing unilateral movement will do is help you improve your muscular stimulation. So if you've been injured on a particular side in the past, it's lacking from the other side. Just doing like a single arm lateral raise like Danny's going to do right now. Something like that, if you had an issue with this particular shoulder and you really want to bring it back up to speed with the rest of your body, you can focus on that, do these unilateral movements. All right. Another thing you can do to add a little bit of complexity and get the most bang for your buck is if you take a knee like we talked about earlier, he's got to stabilize his core to do this, to keep from falling over. You can add that same movement to a kneeling position, and it's going to give you a little bit more of a challenge.
Awesome.
From a rehab perspective, where unilateral work can be really useful is if you've got a single-sided injury. So for instance, if your right knee's pretty hot from rucking or running or something outside, instead of just taking a complete rest, what we can do is just work solely on the left leg. That's where things like rear leg elevated Bulgarian squats or single leg step-ups can be great, because we have what's called a crossover effect. So rather than just ending up with one huge Popeye leg from just working one side, what we actually get is a neurological benefit to help on the injured side as well. So not only does this help from a nervous system perspective in terms of keeping that leg moving, we also get a really solid anabolic response. So by working this one leg, we'll get solid testosterone and growth hormone pump, which is then going to come across and help heal that injured tissue. So next time you're injured, don't just rest it out, work the opposite side, work the good side.
One other added benefit is motor skill development. It'll improve reaction time, and it also helps solidify those movement patterns, especially on those separate sides. If you really want to dive deep into this, and I highly recommend you do at least once a year, there is a team on the app called the Stamina Team, and in that team there is a program called reanimation. So reanimation is going to have some of your complex movements, your bilateral movements, but it's really going to focus on those unilateral movements to get you evened out, get you strong on both sides, and try to keep you injury free.